right, everybody ready? All right. Good evening. I'm Mayor Lawrence Rael, and I'm calling the Tuesday, April 21st, 2026 meeting to order. The time is approximately 6:01. This meeting is streamed on the village website. The public can also participate via Zoom. Instructions and overall public participation guidance is listed on the website and on page 4 of the meeting packet. I would like to state, as required by the New Mexico State Statutes 1978, Section 10-15-1J of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, that the matter discussed in the closed session was limited only to what was specified in the notice. Pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H8, discussions of purchase of water rights for the use at the Del Norte open space property. The second item, pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H, Item 7, settlement of a matter in litigation related to the recovery of payment cleanup costs at 605 Tascosa Northwest, Los Ranchos, New Mexico, 87107. With that, I will now defer to our clerk to give additional instructions regarding the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. The Village of Los Ranchos is providing the opportunity and ability for the public to participate in hybrid meetings. As with any application, digital service, or software, the opportunity for failure can occur. Therefore, the village is not responsible for the inability to connect to the meeting, either by Zoom or viewing via live stream. The meeting is being recorded and will be available online after the meeting on the village website.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Trustee Baldwin?
Here.
Trustee Edward?
Here.
Trustee Kiefer?
Here.
Trustee Rydell?
Here.
Now, if you all please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We'll now move on to general public comment. Only those participants who have signed up prior to the meeting can speak on topics that do not appear on the agenda under public comment and will be given 3 minutes. To be fair to others waiting to speak, a timekeeper will make an announcement while the allotted time is up. Therefore, it is important to keep your comments short and plan on making your point as quickly as possible. No action can occur on these items. If you have questions, please feel free to contact staff during regular business hours. Madam Clerk, please proceed by calling up the individuals that have signed up for general public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first individual is Ms. Carrie Peel. If you would, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
All right, my name is Carrie Peel. My address is 616 Bledsoe Road Northwest. Real quick, we're gonna do real fast audience participation. In your head, think of something you'd find at a garage sale and raise your hand to tell me. 3 minutes, come on, what's something you find at a garage sale? Books, what else? Old lawnmower, what else? Pots. Okay, maybe like, yeah, terracotta pots. What's something else at a garage sale, Teresa? All of those things, that's awesome. You guys are all in luck. Sunday, April 26th from 9 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. You can find all those things and more at the Village Yard Sale at the Alfredo Garcia Barn on next to Hartnett Park. That's where all the best deals are. So you can get a bite to eat at the food trucks, mingle with your fellow villagers, and head home with a new to you lamp and a copy of Stephen King's Misery. So I hope to see you all out there. There's over 50 vendors this time, different booths signed up, which is gonna be awesome. And we look forward to having everybody come out.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, before the next person comes up, you might talk a little bit about the issue associated with planning.
Thank you, Mayor. I unfortunately overlooked that aspect prior to public comment, so I just want to state that any comments on any active planning or zoning applications or applications still within their appeal period are not permitted. These items are or may become quasi-judicial and can only be discussed through the formal hearing process to ensure fairness and due process. The Director of Planning and Zoning may interrupt public comment to advise the speaker if their remarks fall within a quasi-judicial case. So with that being said, the second individual for public comment is Ms. Teresa Royale. If you would, please come up. You have 3 minutes.
Teresa Rael, 1005 El Alhambra Circle. So I am speaking to share concerns regarding loose dogs in the village. Following a recent email to the Neighborhood Crime Watch Group that I sent out, several residents reported issues including loose dogs on the ditches in their neighborhoods, dog waste, and incidents of dogs attacking people and other pets. As a reminder, the village contracted with Bernalillo County Animal Control on September 11, 2025, and they are available 24/7. And if I'm incorrect with that time, correct me. Village ordinances require dogs to be on a secure leash no longer than 6 feet and handled by a person capable of controlling the animal. All incidents regarding loose dogs should be reported directly to animal control, not to me. I would like to propose that the village include an article in the next village vision addressing these concerns. Specifically, the article should emphasize responsible pet ownership and request that residents dispose of dog waste in their own trash containers. I suggest highlighting 5 key points. 1, overview of current village leash laws and ordinances, reporting procedures for contacting Bernalillo County Animal Control, the importance of picking up and properly disposing of pet waste, resident safety and the impact of loose dogs on the community, instructions on where to find ordinances and animal care information on the village website. Additionally, I suggest creating a refrigerator magnet or a postcard featuring important village phone numbers, including animal control for residents to keep on hand, and these can be handed out at all events. Finally, our next Neighborhood Crime Watch meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 14th, here at 6 p.m. We are currently arranging for Captain Jenkins from BCSO, Greg Pettis, the Village Public Safety Advisor, hopefully that starts in May, and a representative from Animal Control to attend, and everybody is welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you so much. With that, Mayor, that concludes public comment.
Very good. Just John, and I know that Shanna, you heard those comments. I think Teresa's ideas are actually spot on. So let's see if we can't maybe do something in the newsletter, and I think a refrigerator magnet would be really appropriate as well. So let's see if we can get that done. All right, let's move on now to our presentations. Village of Los Ranchos financial audit. Robert is not here this evening, and we have this is our village audit with Southwest Accounting Solutions LLC. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Jeff is going to present this part of the company.
Good evening, everyone. I am Jeff Mamero with Southwest Accounting Solutions, your auditor for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. I believe everyone has an audit that needs one, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll try and take up as little of your time as possible. There's a huge accident over on Edith, by the way. Okay, let's start off, if you wouldn't mind going to page 22. This is your statement of net position. I'll hit the major details. For a village your size, obviously you have a exceptional cash position. I'll get to the reasons for that in a little bit, but your cash alone exceeds all of your liabilities. So that's a really good position to be in. The other assets, the deferred outflows, I'll just state real quickly, the deferred outflows and the inflows related to pension, as well as the net pension liability. Those are requirements of GASB Standard 68 to be presented in your financial statements. However, that would not be your liability. It is for retirement. So when someone retires, obviously the state pays, the village doesn't pay. But per government auditing standards, it is required. Oh, sure, no problem. Per government auditing standards, it's required to go in your financial statements. So that, other than the bonds payable, that is actually your largest liability, and in a manner of speaking, it's not your liability. But being that your cash is so high, as well as your fixed assets over depreciation, you have no negative fund balances. It's the other thing I would hit there. If there are no comments, questions, or concerns, we'll go ahead and move on.
Go ahead.
We're good? All right. I'll skip the balance sheet because it just kind of flows into the statement we just were talking about. Let's go ahead and move to page 26. These are your major funds. Being that the village is in a unique situation for a municipality of its size, this is part of the reason that your cash is so high. All of your funds are governmental funds. There are no utilities. Usually when we run into a municipality that has cash issues, it's because of their business/enterprise funds utilities. You guys don't have that worry. So as you can see on this statement, your general fund brought in about 6.05 million in revenue with 3.7 in expenses. So obviously that fund can subsidize anything else the village has going on presently. And you also don't have the same kind of infrastructure concerns that some other places might have as far as water and sewer infrastructure going bad. What you do with the excess funds, and you use it to subsidize some of your other funds, what you do is up to you. As I will always say, I don't make management or government decisions, I just tell you where you're at. But as you can see on this statement, the village as a whole had an excess revenue over expenditures of about 2.5 million. So, you know, layman's terms, you're turning a profit of about 2.5 million for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys read the notes at your own leisure. If you ever have any comments about any of it, feel free to reach out and I'll explain anything you'd like. Let's go ahead and move back to the back, the opinion. Page 76. And I'll explain this briefly. So the type of auditor's report issued, unmodified. There are 4 types of opinions you may receive. So think of it kind of A, B, D, F. We skipped the C. Okay, you guys got an A. Unmodified is the opinion you want. That is the best opinion that there is. It means that we did not have any concerns over your financial statements, that we believe them to be presented fairly. So that's a kudos for the village governance and management. And also one of the few entities in the state of New Mexico with a no finding audit.
Okay.
And with that, I'll open it up.
Any questions, Jeff? Well, go ahead, Trustee Edward.
Thank you very much for doing this. I know there's not a whole lot of people in New Mexico who are qualified to do it, so kudos to you and your firm. One of the questions I have is the timing of cash flows, and you talk about our excess revenues. Can you infer from any prior work you've done relative to this audit or any others, is the timing of our cash flow going to be a problem in the future?
I would put it this way, as I was kind of, stating earlier, when is there a cash flow situation issue with a municipality of your size? Usually it relates to a utility, some kind of infrastructure with, just honestly, you know, very seldom solid waste. Normally it's going to be water or sewer, which is not something you guys have to worry about. Now, you do have some funds that turn negative balances. You know, they are spending more than they're bringing in, but they're kind of, these are funds that are expected to. I can point out a couple examples if you want, real quick. And the ones that might, they're non-majors, so they're not super concerning. But if you roll to page 66 and 67, like, the two that are turning negative in here are other funds. Those are just exceptional special revenue funds. It's only $8,000. And then your debt service fund, that's almost always going to turn a negative balance as far as revenues and expenses go. You're paying off your debt in that. You guys have a couple special items in there where you're getting some property taxes to assist with that. But, you know, 99 times out of 100, that debt service fund is going to be running a negative balance. So that would be your only concern, is if there was some kind of project that would be excessively expensive, or you took out some debt that possibly didn't need to. You know, if there are, and believe it or not, that happens. And, you know, I have to, you know, call it out. They're taking out debt that government should never take out, you know, 10% loans. What are you doing? But with you guys right now, without the utilities, the fund pulling the highest negative balance is a capital projects fund. It's still only 70,000. You know, that's pretty minor amount compared to the overall flow of revenues in the general fund. And those general fund revenues, it's almost all GRT, gross receipts tax. That's almost always going to be there. It's going to be very consistent.
One of the questions I have is, as we are flirting with becoming more urbanized, we have a lot of these dollars are attached to infrastructure. To what extent do you think we have the tax revenue to then support maintaining this infrastructure?
You know, I would have to know the projects themselves. When you look at the general fund, you transferred out about 700,000 in this previous year. I don't think I'd go much above ever in a year 50% more than that. Then you're starting to risk the public monies, and it's the public monies. You know, always treat it that way. Like I say, you guys make the decisions. I just tell you what the results might be. You're in an unusual cash situation, as I said, for a village your size. You know, we deal with a lot of different municipalities. A lot of them are struggling. My advice would always be, don't get carried away on unnecessary projects with the public's money. But I can't stop you from doing that. I'd have to know the specifics of the infrastructure to give a full answer. But this is 2 audits in a row that we're pulling that kind of excessive revenue over expense. And right now the cash is flowing in a positive way. When you see a general SRE, statement of revenue and expenses, where things start changing, then you know that you may be overstepping what you can carry forward. We never want to put pressure down, you know, we never want to put pressure on the future taxpayers either, if we can avoid that. You know, and that's just a situation that most places with utilities, it's a hard thing to come to grasp with, because no one wants to pay higher utility rates, you know, and I'm the one that tells them sometimes you got to raise your utility rates. Everyone hates me. But in this case, you have consistent revenue streams. You have another thing I'll touch on is you have a lot of your cash invested appropriately. Now, those rates won't continue forever, but like you had $608,000 in interest income in the general fund. That won't happen every year. But right now, you know, the last couple of years, it's been a pretty high rate. So that's the one of these revenues in the general fund that's not going to be totally consistent year to year. Most of the others will, but also understand too, in your case, other than grant funding you can receive, that general fund is kind of running everything. That's where the revenue is coming from. So we don't want to put too much upward pressure on the revenues from that. You know, when you look at a statement like this, just have your eyes flow to that general fund and understand that when you're budgeting out, that's where the revenue is coming from. You're going to get some from streets also, but the allocation of GRT, that's part of what would normally go into a general fund is going in there. So it's your GRT, general fund revenue, your gross receipts tax, and your franchise taxes. And on the whole, knowing that I wouldn't budget much over those other than grant fundings you can get. I'd still keep it at a minimal amount of budgeting expenses over those amounts from a year-to-year basis.
To what degree do we report to you classifications or striations or siloing of the source of the GRT, and how much of this is attributable to construction or services, and to what degree do the numbers look good because we had one large construction project that was wrapping up?
So actually, we can touch on this because you guys actually have an MD&A. So we're going to have comparative amounts from 24 and 25, which is not always the case, but.
What page are you looking at?
So the MD&A begins. So the management discussion and analysis, it kind of breaks things down in layman's terms. Not every audit has one of these. You guys do. This will break down comparisons, you know, from year to year. And so like on page 14, for instance, there you can see your cash increase from 24 to 25. Nothing else really sticks out. See, your taxes receivable is pretty consistent. So that means the revenue at the end of the year for both those 2 years was consistent. The grants revenue increased quite a bit. That's something that will fluctuate year to year. It depends on what's going on activity-wise between the two periods. Anything else that sticks out on this part? No. Let's move on to the revenues. Your GRT did increase by 626,000. You know, we're looking at roughly a 13% increase there. That most likely in a lot of cases was due to the percentage rate with inflation too, you know, speaking to that. So that's going to alter things.
So what is what do you believe is a healthy diet of GRT allocated between different industries?
That is, once again, is something that is a governance / management decision. The way you guys had it allocated this year, roughly 82-18. I don't see anything wrong with that because some places will allocate that kind of amount to their utilities. Some places won't put any GRT revenues in utilities. But for the projects that you have going on, you allocated it to streets because you're expecting some work there, et cetera. It wasn't an amount that I would say is obscene. You know, you forced excess revenues into a fund that we would normally never see that though. So in that way, you were kind of overreaching it, but once again, I don't make that call. You had, you know, a little over 200,000 in expenses in there, collected a little over 700,000. I can't recall, you know, off the top of my head, the projects that might be upcoming. You guys would have to speak to that, or management would, but that seems slightly excessive to pull out of the general fund. But once again, I don't make that decision.
Okay, Trustee Kiefer.
I just have one quick question. I know you said one of the biggest expenses for a municipality our size are in the utilities, which we don't have that exposure.
Yes.
But one of the resounding themes that I hear from the public is, I wish we had our own law enforcement. So my curiosity is how much of an expense is, in your experience of municipalities our size, is law enforcement when you don't have a JPA like we have in place?
With one your size, I'm trying to think of one, off the top of my head. So Socorro and then Carlsbad that I deal with. You'll definitely be getting some LEPF funding money. If you went out that route. And then recently they've had a bunch of recruitment grants too. I think those may be going the way of the dodo, but we'll see. That's a fund that your general fund will end up having to subsidize. Like, there's no way around that. If that's the path that you went, I don't see any way that it would not be subsidized to the level that it would be. So I generally have, without knowing how many officers you were going to have, what kind of pay rates they were going to have, et cetera, I would not know. I imagine that you would get state grant funding. There's also usually some types of federal funding available for that. But yeah, I'd have to know the plans. I'd just be throwing out wild guesses without knowing more specifics. But yeah, it would be, just so everyone's aware, it would most likely be subsidized by your general fund. It would not fund itself. Very rarely does.
All right, Jeff, any other questions? Trustee Brenna.
Okay, I just have one basic question. If we take a look again at the investment in capital assets that we have, is there a rule of thumb that's used by municipalities to determine how much investment in capital assets should be devoted to, again, to capital assets versus other kinds of operations? Is there some benchmark that's used?
There's really no kind of universal rule for that. We have to also understand, once again, this is such a unique place. A lot of places, like he was speaking of cash flow statements. You guys don't have a cash flow statement because you don't have any business type funds. But the cash flow would kind of show what a utilities operating was doing, removing the depreciation out of that, because it goes in to your SRE and flows up to your statement of net position with utilities, because they're on the accrual basis, whereas these funds are not until you get to the government-wide level. So, yeah, there's no steadfast rule. With you guys, you have to understand the reason that your assets are so high in comparison to the depreciation itself is because such a huge percentage of the assets are land, which doesn't depreciate. So you're always going to have tremendous amount of assets for this village, at least as long as that's the case. As long as like 50% of your assets are non-depreciable, you're going to have a huge excess of assets over accumulated depreciation. Now, looking for what is in the public's best interest as far as the assets themselves, that way you'd have to get a capital asset plan from someone, and they charge you for that. Like, they have you pay, but they'll also want goals, future goals, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, there's no hard and fast rule for what it should be.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate the explanation. And with that, we'll move on to our next item. Madam Clerk, we don't need a vote on this. Is there a resolution on the agenda? Is that correct?
Mayor, trustees, yes, it's item A under new business. We will vote on the resolution adopting the audit.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll move on now to.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. To item B, a report out on the legislative update. Kim Leanne is here. Unfortunately, our other lobbyist, Larry Horan, had a personal issue and a death in the family, so he was unable to be here tonight, so Kim is going to pitch in. And before we get off, since we're still thinking about the audit, the one thing that is important, and it dovetails into Kim's presentation, keep in mind, and the village has experienced it just like many other municipalities, and that is during the legislative session, there are times when our legislators decide to, if you will, take GRT off of certain types of items. And once that GRT does come off of those items, then it'll go to the bottom line in terms of, and it hits the village harder, because as our auditor just described, all of our revenues, by and large, are GRT. So, for example, when the GRT was taken off of food, all of the municipalities, including Los Ranchos, were hit pretty significantly. There was some revenue sharing that was done for a period of time, but then as time goes on, that revenue sharing went away as well. So, so keep in mind, that's just why it's sort of appropriate that Kim is up, because our next legislative session is a 60-day session, not just a financial session. So, as you all know, those sessions are Katie bar the door, as they say. Who knows what can come up? But anyway, Kim, with that intro, if you can give us an update on this last session, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. I'm pleased to give you an update on the 26th legislative session. The 2026 legislative session convened on January 20th, adjourned on February 19th, and the governor's signing period concluded on March 11th. During the 2026 session, 74 bills were sent to the governor's desk, 71 were signed, 2 were vetoed, and 1 was pocket vetoed. Overall, it was a very successful, productive session for the Village of Los Ranchos. We were successful in both protecting the village's interests and advocating for key priorities. First, from a policy standpoint, one of the most important outcomes this year was the defeat of several bills that would have limited local control over zoning and land use. These proposals could have significantly impacted the village's rural character and planning authority, so their defeat was a major win for Los Ranchos. While these measures did not advance this year, similar proposals, along with new preemption attempts, are likely to be returned next year in the 60-day legislative session. So it is critical to continue emphasizing the importance of protecting local governance and retaining local decision-making authority. Protecting this, as the mayor indicated earlier, additionally, protecting that local tax base, your GRT deductions was another key issue during the session. The tax package ultimately included only limited provisions affecting local revenues. Throughout the session, Larry and I consistently conveyed that the reliance on GRT to the fund for the Village of Los Ranchos was essential for infrastructure and other village expenses. Unlike the state, cities have limited alternative revenue sources, like you heard from the individual that did your audit, to offset these types of losses, making stability of local GRT base critical to maintain. So this will be something that's really important, like the mayor indicated, in the next 60-day to communicate to legislators. There were several other initiatives which would have really impacted the village's GRT base that did not go through. From a funding perspective, we secured approximately $3.9 million in capital outlay funding for the village's priorities. This includes the Agri-Nature Center, roadway improvements, funding for the Veterans Memorial, and the Village Hall, this building, roof improvements. These projects reflect longstanding priorities and will benefit the residents of the village. Throughout the session, Larry and I monitored legislation daily, tracked bills related to land use, taxation, infrastructure, and housing. Also, we coordinated regular meetings, reviewed priorities, and worked closely with legislators, staff, the governor's office, and other individuals on behalf of the village. We paid close attention to the state budget. This year, it included significant investments in water infrastructure, transportation, and housing, which will create additional opportunities later this year for the village of Los Ranchos. So in summary, it was a great session for the village. We were able to protect local decision-making power, secure meaningful funding, and position the village for continued progress on infrastructure and community priorities. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Thanks, Kim. Before we go to the questions, I would say one other thing. You might want to just touch base on the transportation bill in general in terms of what the investment is, because that's a significant opportunity for us. And then quality of life and other related kind of funds that are actually opportunities for us going forward as well.
That's right. So about 3 years ago, the Village of Los Ranchos received $1.2 million for a quality of life grant. That project is going into Old Village Hall. There will be another opportunity to apply for another round of funding for that same grant, maybe for another project, depending the direction of the mayor and the trustees, whether that be, for the barn or the Agri-Nature Center or something to that effect. So there will be an opportunity for that. There are also about $100 million in the Transportation Project Fund for local municipalities. There's also $50 million for road safety and wildlife corridors, and then another $10 million for reducing traffic fatalities. And so those will all be in the form of grants to NMDOT later this year. The 27 budget does go into effect on July 1. As it relates to the capital outlay, it is general fund dollars, meaning all of those dollars will be available to the village on July 1.
That's great. I think those wildlife corridors, to Teresa's earlier comment, if all the dogs are loose, maybe we can do something over at Paseo. And anyway, thanks, Kim, for that. I just wanted to make sure that the trustees and the community know that aside from the appropriations that we were able to get, there are other pots of money out there.
That's right.
That, especially the Water Trust Board and the transportation piece, that we'll actively look to see if we can't augment some of our projects with some state funds.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There's $200 million in the Water Trust Board Fund available for local governments.
With that, let me see if any of the trustees have any questions. Trustee Rena?
Nope.
Trustee Kiefer?
I have one.
Trustee Kiefer?
Hi, Kim. Thank
Hi,
you.
you're welcome.
I guess I haven't stayed on top of the potential GRT impacts that failed this year, but that may be on the horizon for the 27 fiscal year. Can you kind of tell me what those services are that would really impact the village?
Let me just get to that. Just one second. I do have it here.
I do know one, just while Kim's looking, one of the things that happens in the session is sometimes there are, shall we say, good, if you will, ideas that are presented to legislators where cities or, shall we say, other nonprofits want to keep the GRT from being distributed back to the cities and counties or to the state. So one that was on the front burner was not permitting cities and counties to take any GRT, believe it or not, from any projects for workforce housing and or low-income housing. Mm-hmm. So normally a project like that, like we experienced with the Pelodrome project, the GRT was distributed back the proportionate share to the village. One of the bills that was introduced was to eliminate that GRT from going back to cities and counties, and just to have that GRT be reinvested into the housing programs so that more units can get built, which is a laudable goal, obviously. It's important to try and get as many of those homes built. The challenge is that you also create a, if you will, unintended consequence that that the infrastructure and the support, once those homes are built, it falls on the municipality to provide the services, which is maybe whether it's fire or police or whether it's roads and infrastructure. So it cuts both ways. And so the municipal league is always really on top of those kinds of, if you will, carving out some GRT for some specific purpose and creating what folks might call a slippery slope. And before you know it, you get more and more cuts, and then it becomes a pretty challenging issue. But I don't know if there were any others that you recognized.
Yes, Mayor, and Trustee Kiefer, Senate Bill 13 was a proposed GRT deduction for healthcare co-insurance payments.
There you go.
That estimated about a $26 million impact to local governments. Another initiative was Senate Bill 182, which was a dyed diesel exemption, and that was about a $50 million impact to local governments. Those are just some examples. So what happens in the legislative session is, there are probably 20 tax exemption bills that individual legislators bring forward. And because most of them are exemptions, they all impact local governments. And so these were just two that were being considered for the tax package. And so therefore, it's what individuals refer to as a holes in the Swiss cheese. They keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and it just impacts local municipalities each year even more. And so I think that what really needs to happen is just an overhaul on the GRT system in New Mexico.
Well, and I guess as long as there's no prohibition on impact fees,
That's
then
right.
municipalities are going
That's
to
right.
start just implementing impact fees
Yeah, that's exactly
to
right.
these developers. Okay, thank you.
So yes, those were the two big ones that were going to impact local municipalities.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Baldwin.
Thank you. And that kind of foresight about, look ahead, because we know in long sessions, certain things tend to
That's right.
increase and bubble. And obviously GRT is as you heard earlier, our lifeblood currently. Are there other trends and themes that you see coming up for the long session? Are there dynamics, political dynamics or policy dynamics, hangovers from prior sessions that you see coming that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I think that we're in a unique year. This is an election year. The Senate is not up for election, but the House of Representatives and all statewide races are up for election. So there will be a gubernatorial election. And in that respect, all of the candidates are bringing their ideas to New Mexicans. And so that includes everything from, affordable health care to economic development and so forth. So it's, right now is the key time to be really paying attention to what those gubernatorial candidates and what those local House races are bringing to New Mexicans and what their ideas are and how that will impact local municipalities, counties, and local governments.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I would just add, I think the one that probably Kim would agree with, because it's now happened several legislative sessions, and that's the issue of local governments having the ability on planning and zoning. There's just, it's across the country. It's not just New Mexico. And this is the idea of the concern with especially with housing. And so we'll probably really need to be, watching that kind of legislation that would preempt local governments from doing zoning in certain cases to, as it relates to housing and some of those economic development projects.
That's exactly right, Mayor. And I would encourage you all to read Senate Bill 131. It did not pass, but this would have eliminated certain building height restrictions, mandated allowances for duplex and townhomes in residential zones, and prohibited minimum parking mandates. So that's just one example, and I encourage all of the trustees to read that bill. House Bill 17 and also House Bill 110 were two other examples of, legislation where they would have taken over local control on those planning and zoning rules.
Mayor?
Go ahead, trustee Kiefer.
On that point, Kim, I know for those of us that attended the Municipal League session day, they are very much opposed to and working very hard for the municipalities to try to combat that agenda and those legislative items. They seem rather confident that even though it keeps rearing its ugly head, that it won't go anywhere. I don't have the same confidence because, as you see, sometimes we kind of take our eyes off the ball and things happen. What do we need to be doing from a small municipality, in your opinion, outside of calling our legislators, to really get them to understand the impacts that this would have on the communities?
Well, obviously, first and foremost, is continuing to meet with your elected officials, not only your local elected officials, but, those elected officials on key committees, and telling the story of the village of Los Ranchos and, why you're so unique. And keeping Los Ranchos rural is important to the residents, that you serve, your constituents that you serve. And so keeping those conversations, I think that Mayor Real can probably agree with this in that the turnover right now in the Senate and the House has, over the last several years, has been huge. So it's always new faces. There's always a new Senate member or a House member. And so it's really important to continue to tell that story on behalf of your constituents.
Trustee Edward.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So who was trying to get in our kitchen when it comes to telling us how to plan our municipality? Who are the forces behind that?
I think it's different legislators. The sponsors of this bill, there was several different sponsors, so I'm not really sure.
How about industries?
There, in any bill, right, there's always somebody who has asked that legislator to run that bill. In these specific bills, House Bill 17, 110, and 131, I am not sure who, were the supporters of those bills, but I will find out for you.
I think it's important for us to know.
And sir, a lot of times it's developers too, but I will find out that for you.
Okay. And then a couple other questions I had when it comes to the taxation element. It started out in the 30s as an emergency tax, and it's grown into what it is today. I think for us as a community, at least from where I'm sitting, consistency and persistency is important. And how are we attacking this from the standpoint that we can generate persistency and consistency? And are these exemptions that you talked about earlier, are they significant enough that it actually would up-tip the apple cart for us?
Well, I would think I would have to learn more about your GRT revenue, where it comes from. So I would want to learn a little bit more about that and dive a little bit deeper into that. However, like I said earlier, you always have to be persistent. You have to continue to have conversations with legislators, educate them, get in front of them, and tell your story. It's an ongoing full-time job, and it needs to be done continuously. So yes.
Okay.
You know, it just depends on the tax base, on how municipalities are impacted. Some are impacted more than others on certain GRT exemptions. So it all depends.
So the last question I have is, the permanent funds were designed to take funds from the extractive industries and place them into an account which would be invested to replace the lost industries and create new revenues as opposed to supplanting the regular annual revenues of the state. And to that regard, I guess I think it would be important for us as a community to remind people that they're not a slush fund for special reoccurring revenue projects that don't add to the economy, but that actually will replace and create economies for people to actually live and work. I mean, that's an important thing for me because I don't want those funds to go out and if oil and gas is gone, if coal is gone, if timber is gone, if whatever is gone, we really dry up as a state if we haven't created those industries 10 or 20 or 30 years in advance.
That's exactly right. And I do think that Secretary Rob Black, is making an effort to do that. In, you know, a lot of tax incentives went to things like, you know, advanced technologies this year. And so I do think that the state is looking at that. I don't represent them, but I think that Secretary Black of the Economic Development Department is doing a great job in that respect. And he's, you know, looking at other industries and figuring out how to bring other industries to the state.
Okay. Well, I think the last piece I would say is, look, I think, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Frank, I apologize. Go ahead, Counselor. Trustee, I'm sorry.
Kim, thank you very much for all the work you did up in Santa Fe. The question I have, though, is that, was this year kind of considered an anomaly, given the trends that we've seen in spending by the government here? And, well, I guess what I'm concerned about is, what do you think we can depend on in terms of going after funding, state funding, in future years, given the changes that may be occurring in oil and gas, the changes that may be occurring politically? But, you know, and I've read several different accounts, and people have some very different views on this. I just wondered whether there is some level of agreement about what, you know, 27, 28, 29 look like, so that we be able to prepare ourselves in order to find additional resources that would serve the village.
So, and the mayor can chime in on this too, but as it relates to the revenue forecast, obviously, more than half of the state's budget goes to oil and gas as a result of oil and gas. You know, there were some big ticket items that, you know, the governor did ensure that got done this year, including universal childcare. And so, you know, I don't think that we can rely on oil and gas forever, and those revenues are going to have to be replaced. And, you know, any municipality, county, tribe, local government is, you know, going to have to think about that and think about, you know, grants, other revenue sources, GRT, and building their, you know, their own economy. So, Mayor?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Those, some of those initiatives are obviously as a result of a good economy for the state. And, you know, look what's going on right now with oil and gas in terms of what the price of the barrel is right now. That's money into New Mexico's coffers because it's significant in terms of what it contributes to the state funding. But I think the real challenge for the legislature has always been, as it is for us at the local level, and that is, you know, when does recurring revenue become a good thing to use versus one-time money that people like to use it for recurring revenue expenses? right? So, you're paying for long-term programs with one-time money. And eventually the one-time money goes away and you still have the expectations and the needs of the community that have grown accustomed to. So I do think that those are kinds of challenges that all governments have, and I suspect the legislature, obviously, because, the state's very diverse. And it's, I think, important for us, I was gonna make a point at the end, is just simply is that we gotta stay in touch with the municipal league in terms of the committees. And that's why, to Trustee Kiefer's point, going up during legislative day with the municipal league is the only way I see for municipalities really to, in unison, talk about these issues, right? Look, let's just be really candid. Our small municipality, I will do what I can. I'll stand on the tallest tree, if you will, or what have you. But once there's strength in numbers and working with the municipal league and partnering up with our communities, I think the other piece is also important is that the fact that we are a rural community surrounded by a very, very urbanized area, it's even more of a challenge for us. We're basically, screaming out at the top of our lungs and hoping somebody listens. But the point is that, but we also have one thing that's going for us, and that is that we have a great community, and we have a lot of resourceful folks like you all and others that live in this community that we sometimes take for granted, that have some independent influence in and of themselves. And I will tell you, at least when I was up there looking for legislative funds for our projects, it was those independent voices that really actually helped us get this done, right? So I do think that the municipal league is a good place for us to invest our time and money in. And I would say also, it doesn't hurt at all to have good lobbyists. And both Larry and Kim did an excellent job. And I want to thank you guys for every time I had to get up there, I got in front of the right people, in front of the governor, in front of the legislators, and then some. And as a result, we did well, and we'll continue to do that. And I would encourage all of you to really do the same, as you all know more people than I probably, and know people in different positions in the legislature. So.
And there will be opportunity through the interim, and I'll communicate that with Village Manager Avila on interim committees. So if you want to attend an interim committee, go and listen. I will make sure that those meetings are being communicated as well. So that's a really great time, actually, to get to know legislators, because it's not during the session, it's not hectic, they're not on the go, they're a little bit calmer, and so that's what I would recommend as well.
All right, thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you. And I do want to thank Larry Horan. He is a great partner to me, and I'm sorry he couldn't be here tonight, but I want to thank him for all his work too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, we'll now move on to our next presentation, and that is the Del Norte open space updates. And so let me start with Jacobo, who is our resident agricultural expert in Del Norte open space.
Easy.
Easy. Jacobo.
Mayor, trustees, thanks for having me here this afternoon. I'm Jacobo Sanchez with Southwest Soil Health. I'm here to give an update and answer any questions that you guys might have about what's going on at Paseo, what has happened over the last year, and what are the future plans for all this infrastructure that has been installed. I can briefly go over a little bit of a timeline of what has happened as far as infrastructure over last year, and then if I need backup for numbers and specifics, then Keen is gonna help me make that a little bit more understandable. So over the course of last year, a walking path was put along the field behind Miller's Feed. The pond that was there catching excess runoff water from the fields was filled in with concrete. We repurposed a 48-inch culvert pipe and it was perforated, so we installed that there and backfilled all of that. Keen was then able to get some dirt brought in, make a bigger parking area, utilize the wood chips, add in a handicap parking spot over there on pavement. A new fence was put across that area. After that, there was a lot of tree trimming that has happened on the fields behind Miller's Feed and also the west side property on its fence lines and its perimeter, which it's mostly elms, and they start to push up against the fence and damage things. So the next thing that happened after that was new fencing was put in on the west property. Now it'll have all four sides almost, waiting for the last one to get done on the north end. Old fence was removed to make the property look a little bit more inviting. That would be on the south side between the Westfield and Paseo. So that old fence was removed. Through a few years of working through different options, funding was found to put in a section of irrigation ditch behind Miller's Feed into 18-inch HDPE pipe, and then that transitioned to a concrete ditch that runs along the middle of that property to then be able to transfer water north and south of that center line of that property to break it up and to also utilize, be able to water the fields more efficiently under these irrigation low flow situations. After that, administration and the mayor, we talk and what else can we do and what other improvements can we make. Another one is between the two fields, between the east field behind Miller's Feed and the west field, there's the Chamisal ditch. That doesn't really flow as much anymore under low flow situations like now. So we came up with a plan to install a pipeline on the north end of that property and utilize the MRGCD's infrastructure off the main canal, which has a lot more water and runs more often. And so a pipeline will be installed on the north side of that west property. It'll redirect the water to water from the north to the south instead of watering from the east to the west and the west to the east. Also, part of that thought process is in the past we had removed fences, and it is a place where balloons like to land, and we encourage that with all the signage and stuff that the village has installed. But it was broken up into and had 5 berms that balloons and those folks would have to cross over. So it is going to have to stay 2 levels, an east level and a west level, but they will be level on each side with each other. So we're going to eliminate the berms with the new pipeline infrastructure and the redirection of the irrigation water. We're not going to remove the turnouts off of the Chamisal on the east side, just in case we need them for any other supplemental water. And it'll be unique if we have the right coordination. And now you'll see through the village that only one ditch is running at a time or one main because they're transferring water across. But in a better situation with better water, we might be able to water that field with 2 ditches and instead of 1. So any questions on any of that I can answer, and Keen can help me if.
Jacobo, what are you going to plant in terms of the fields once you label them?
Mayor, thank you for that question. Trustees, now that the new infrastructure is going to be installed, progressively the fields will get relasered to where they need to be and planted because of the timing and what we all talked about with how, what our best option would be is we're going to plant teff grass. Teff grass is a summer annual. We'll hopefully get it installed before water runs out, but I just, as of about 3 hours ago, the pumps that pump water on the west side of the river from the Corrales siphon, those pumps have been shut off today because the river has dropped lower than what the pumps can pump out. So it's a pretty good indicator that, the rest of the irrigation system is probably, we're getting close to the end of water or more of that rotation and longer duration between irrigation intervals. But the TEF, as a summer annual, will hopefully still come up with any monsoon rain, at least get the ground covered and stabilized. And then we'll plan to do some no-tilling in the fall if it looks like weather's gonna be right. Or, we'll still utilize that practice for the spring of next year to incorporate other crops.
Okay. Any questions for Jacobo? Trustee Baldwin?
Thank you. Thank you. This is a very helpful update, and I very much appreciate that the Chamisal ditch turnouts will remain, and that we're looking at as much redundancy as we can, and perhaps a little optimistic pray for rain. The section of Donald Tree open space that currently has what I would call sort of the up-and-coming cottonwood forest, and the native grasses, is that going to be maintained in that type of environment?
Mayor, Trustee Baldwin, yes, so there's a couple areas that are pretty natural. Some thought process was put in to have a turnout that still can supplement water in those drainage areas. On the west side, west of the pump house, south of the field, between the field and Paseo, the natural grama grass that David Montoya had planted in is still staying and able to pretty much survive on its own with the little bit of rain that we do get.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Kiefer?
Thank you for being here. I've been following this space for at least 4 years now, 2 years as an elected official, and I think I remember when you were awarded the contract and there were some plans, and initially those plans kind of went by the wayside because of irrigation problems, and then it turned into fallowing, and then trees were planted, and it seems like those trees have been let to die, and so I'll be very transparent. I've been very disappointed in that site, how it's been maintained, how it's been managed. And so I hear a lot of talk of new infrastructure, new pumps, new this, new that. But I thought we were at that place 2 years ago. And I keep hearing, no, we're not there yet. And here's what we're going to try. Here's what we're going to do. So I guess my question is, what is and I guess who and how frequent, when plans change, do you commit or update staff with those changes for that approval? Because like I said, it's looked like a dead piece of property for at least 3 years now.
Mayor, Trustee Kiefer, I presented the plan, and as a part of the RFP process, I have not made any decisions for that property without either a mayor's approval or administrative recommendation or approval. To give a little bit of a context for, let's say, the field behind Miller's Feed, at that time, there was a lot more water than there is now. At least we had reserve water that would get us through the typical irrigation season all the way up to October 31st. Because of the length of that property and the turnouts being at the very west end of the property off of the Chamisal, it would typically take 50 hours to water. And those numbers come from MRGCD and their records on the ISOs. Over losing more water, MRGCD wants us to irrigate 1 acre an hour. So that property that gets irrigated is about 18 acres. So the reason that there was a pond where the parking lot is now near Miller's Feed and it was so big and deep is because the water would just stay running for that amount of time, and whatever tailwater came would just end up in the pond. It wasn't efficient, and we weren't probably going to be able to get away with that for very long. So then the idea of the pipeline was brought to the trustees, and it wasn't favored very well to get into debt for $600,000 or $800,000 to put an irrigation pipeline on a loan in partnership with MRGCD. So then The idea was to reinstall and dig a new dirt ditch. Well, the dirt ditch had hydrologic issues with the low flow and the amount of head pressure that was coming off of the Chamisal. So the dirt ditch would overflow before it would get to the fields. Well, during this time, we're starting this up at the beginning of the season. We're also running out of water by July, by June, and now we're gonna be out of water by April. So yeah, 3 years, there was some fallowing, but there was a reason why these attempts were being made to get some sort of infrastructure in to water the fields. If you went back on Google Earth, you would see what parts were able to be watered. Not to mention last year, I'm not gonna say, I don't know the right word to say, but you know, the decision was made to transfer the water rights from that field behind Miller's Feed over to the Agri-Nature Center for the year so that we could better use the water and make it green over here on Rio Grande because we didn't have the infrastructure in yet. I'm assuming it's the mayor that found the money to do all this infrastructure, and you know, Keen can talk about those numbers of what has been put in, but that's the last 4 years of why that part of the field looks that way.
So I guess I expected when I saw, and thank you for that. You know, when I saw you were doing a presentation, kind of something that we saw in the RFP, right? Of here's my plan. Now that we've got the infrastructure, here's my plan. So I'd like to maybe ask the mayor in a couple months if you could return with a plan. Because I do think part of the contract was a 1 year, every year update. And last year we never got an update on this space either. And so I appreciate you being here. But I know it's you know, as we keep looking at, you know, purchasing water rights and doing this and doing that, well, are we being the best stewards with that investment and all this infrastructure that we're putting in? Are we doing right by the community? And I know it's a point of contention with a lot of people in the area too, because it looks like you're spending all this money and it looks like a dirt field still, you know? And I know there was a huge investment of time and effort and energy. I know Trustee right now was part of the tree planting. And now, unfortunately, they're pretty much all dead. And so I'm just hoping that we're finally turning a corner now with these huge investments that the village has been making.
Mayor, Trustee Kiefer, thank you. You know, there is a lot of thought process that goes in, and you know, the Keene in the village did put in an irrigation line to help supplement all those trees, the Afghan pines plus all the cottonwoods on the edge of the field. Some of them have, you can almost, a lot of them look like they have been deliberately broken. Just, you know, they were little, you know, they're young trees, and a lot of them have just been snapped off at the top. But, you know, I think moving forward with the infrastructure, we're not going to have an excuse now of why the fields can't be green and be better. And to touch on why I don't think there was a presentation last year is because of the water rights being transferred. And so there wasn't really anything that was going to be able to get grown on the east side. The west side was still irrigated and watered the best that it could. There was one more thing.
Yeah. Any other questions? Trustee Edwards?
I just have a couple quick questions. Can you just clearly delineate for us some drop dead dates on completion?
Mayor, Trustee Edwards, I drop dead dates for planting time, irrigating, the infrastructure that's still going to be installed. What do you need?
Well, I think all those, I mean, of course, once the infrastructure's done, that would be your first drop dead date. Is that fair to say?
Mayor, Trustee Edwards, yes, the east side behind Miller's Feed, that infrastructure has been put in. So there is active land leveling that is going to be happening there. We have still farming, we don't necessarily have to apply for SWIP or wind control or any dust control permits, but, we try to, not create too much dust. So last Friday, Saturday were days where nothing was going on because it creates a lot of dust that when you're grinding around on lasering those fields, it gets pretty fine. So we're not doing it then. Move over to the west side field. That infrastructure has not been installed yet. The contractor is waiting to give Keene a start date for the pipeline on the west field. I will be rough grading and getting that field, the west field, to a place where once the pipeline is ready to install, we're not going to have to cut any dirt for that contractor.
Yeah, and you don't have to share with us now, but I think it would be worthwhile, and for our other trustees and the mayor, that we have some sort of a target date for each one of these things so that we can judge and create an expectation for ourselves that's realistic, but then also hold you accountable to a standard. And to the degree that we hold ourselves to a standard and create a clear expectation so we don't have a false sense of success, or that we have, is it reasonable for us to be upset? And I don't know if we have one of those. Do we have anything like that?
Mayor, Trustee Edward, we're working towards that. There's a few factors. The contractor that needs to be getting in there to put in infrastructure, I'm not going to put all the blame on him. We have to get all the fields lasered. We have to get them planted. In part of the decision and the timeline, ideally, if all this infrastructure was in either last year or over the winter, then the fields could have been relasered by beginning of March, and then, things would have already been planted and watered. But by making the decision to use teff grass almost as our fail-safe and a summer annual, we need to have, if we want that to be successful, we have to have consistent 65-degree days because it is a summer annual. So these freeze days, if we would have had stuff planted, it would have been killed for a waste. Yeah. So we want 65-degree consistent day and nights, which teff grass here is typically planted middle of May.
Well, if you could just draw a line in the sand or in the dirt and set for us what we believe to be and what you believe to be a fair expectation so that we can come back and we can look at the ground and see if something's coming up out of it at a time that we expected. And if not, we know why. Because you've given a lot of good reasons, but I think that we need to have some definitive expectation, because with that expectation, we're either going to be patting you on the back or we're going to be asking you more questions. And I don't know at what point I am in the conversation right now. Should I be patting you on the back or should I be asking more questions?
Mayor, Trustee Edwards, the last thing that I hope everybody takes in consideration is, based on the timelines that we're currently working with, if there is no water, nothing is going to grow.
I realize that.
That's the last one, other than the planting date of the teff and hoping that we have water. Best case scenario is we get some good monsoon and that seed will still germinate and come up.
Great.
Okay. Anything else? Keene, do you add anything?
So I'm Keene Heinzelman, Facilities Manager. I have been talking with the contractor. We got the NOO today. We waited for a month for the state to approve this NOO, and this is the last project that we have. He is ordering the materials, and he says it's 2 weeks to install. He expects to start in May, so that puts him completed by the middle of May. And that will be it for the infrastructure that we need to do on that property for a very long time.
Who's the contractor?
That is Anchor-Built. Anchor-Built?
Anchor-Built. They're doing the laser leveling?
No. Jacobo has a contract with us, and he is doing the laser leveling. And so most of the work will actually be completed. And then the Chamisol is dry right now, and that's also what Jacobo is waiting for, is once that is, we know water is put back in there, then he can finish up everything and then plant everything basically all at once, at least on the east side. And on the west side, as soon as we have water there, I mean, the main channel always has water. And that was the reason why we put that 18-inch ditch on that side, is we know we're gonna have a lot more water consistently.
Thank you.
I want to just, thank you very much, Keenan and Jacobo. I just want to put a finer point for you all as well. I get it, when people look at that field and look at it not being planted, I think there's lots of other things to think about. You know, when I became mayor, I said to you all that we were going to do some investment in some infrastructure. And we have made significant investments, so I would just say, in spite of maybe the tone of concern about what we're not done, I think there's also a point to celebrate. We've now invested almost $750,000 into that whole area of state funds. We've put in the ditches, as Jacobo described. You couldn't get water to the end of the field because they were dirt ditches, and they would break on the back end, so the water would spill all over the place and never get to the end. And so we talked about the idea of putting in a pipeline, and it was super expensive. And the final idea came up, well, let's just line the ditch that's there already, and let's put concrete in it so that way we have all the outlets and we can water the entire fields. The challenge that we've had is that because we're using state money, and the point that Hakeem just made is we have to wait for the state to approve the or give us the approvals to use the funds. And when we're waiting 6 weeks and maybe 2 months, 2 or 3 months to get those approvals, we can't move forward on some of these projects. So our goal, at least my goal, was I was hoping that we were going to get the concrete in place and the fields ready to go by March, so that Jacobo would have enough time to do the work that he needed to do. And obviously we weren't able to get that timeline, but we're not that far behind in the sense of hopefully getting these fields in line with what you all would like to see happen. But there is a lot of work being done there. And the last thing I would say, look, and I respect Trustee Kiefer's perspective, because I've talked to a lot of the residents in that area. And look, I think the biggest issue we have right now is whether or not we're going to have water. And I just want to make sure we're not going to hold Jacobo, feet to the fire. He plants and then there's not water. I mean, that's why I think the teff grass is almost a no risk, if you will, to some extent, crop, in that if we get some monsoons, it'll still help that teff grass, cover the fields and hopefully turn them green. If we get some water, even better from the Conservancy, at least for one watering. But we've been working with them hand in hand. So I would say, look, I get it. There's a perspective, but there's also a lot of work that's been put forth to try and make sure that we've got the infrastructure, especially in that long field that we all see from 4th Street, right? And so anyway, we'll continue. How about we do this, Jacobo and Keen? Let's agree that maybe in the next 2 months, we'll give an update on a monthly basis, just as part of, John, as part of your report on where we are with the planting and the laser leveling and the watering, so that way you all can stay abreast as to things are going on that field.
Mayor,
Okay.
may I ask one question to Keen? Keen, quick question. I know you said west side we're good. What are we doing on the west side? And I guess my understanding is that there's, on the west side between Rio Grande and the ditch, there's like this big pocket of dirt that we're watering to potentially put a pocket park or something. Is that?
I'll take that one, Trustee Kiefer. So that is a piece of property that the former mayor and others had been interested in developing so that you could have a connection from Rio Grande Boulevard on the entire length of Paseo. That piece of property, folks have sort of referred to it as the Asadi property. It's basically what it looks like a holding pond, basically. And there is the Albuquerque Water Authority runs the San Juan Chama pipeline right to that area. So it's got some infrastructure already that's in place. So the idea here is we have sign an agreement with the Conservancy District to have, because they have a landscape architect folks on contract to do some work, some minimal work to develop a plan to do a trail and some work to that property to, so that we can have an access to that area. And that work is being done now. The design work is actually just got signed last week. And so we'll work with the Conservancy District. They are going to be improving a ditch that serves a couple of property owners there along the south side of the property. And our goal is to just clean up that area and create it into a walking trail and maybe put some other, if you will, vegetation to just clean it up so that folks can have access all the way across from Fourth all the way to Paseo.
Thank you, and I guess I asked because I know one of the concerns is those with, property that are actually trying to use water for, crop building, or the concern is everybody's fighting for water.
Sure.
Right, and so it's how do you balance our residents that are actually using it for agriculture purposes versus us as municipality using it for aesthetic purposes, right? And so it's something I think that we really need to kind of keep our finger of the pulse on as we all start realizing there's no water to be had for anybody.
Sure, and I think that that's the goal here, is to do something that's minimal in use of water and that it's drought tolerant, if you will, vegetation, so that it doesn't, it's not going to be a green space like you see here at Harnett Park or that kind of use, but it's something that is, if not else, is, landscaped enough so that folks can actually utilize the property, but it doesn't consume the water that maybe all the other farmland that Jacobo is working on or that we have at the north, at the agri-nature center. Go ahead, Trustee Rana.
If I may add to the discussion here, I mean, I think as we do this, excuse me, as we do this in terms of infrastructure, we need to be thinking, as we've just talked about here, about conservation as well. Because I know that there are, as an example, grasses out there that are very drought tolerant, that do not require very much water.
Right.
Okay, and so I think that we need to be very clear about how we can reduce the amount of water that we need. It's with the infrastructure that we have, but be able then to ensure that we're going to have something that is going to be enjoyed by the residents. But again, we need to understand that we're living in a drought-stricken environment here. So the conservancy part of this, I think, needs to be part of any discussion.
Right. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Any other questions? With that, thank you, Keenan and Jacobo, and we'll
Thank you.
we'll get to our regular agenda now. We are on item 6, approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes of the March 17, 2026 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval of the minutes with a couple of non-material edits.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Go ahead, Trustee Baldwin.
Sure, on page 89, line 34, this is in Director Columbao's comments. Line 34, it should be, it was in response to damming, as in D-A-M-M, not D-A-M-N. And then on line 136, the contiguous cottonwood forest, as opposed to force. And then on page 90, line 140, it should be and created a Sakia association rather than a safety association. And then on page 94, line 343, the sentence is, I do appreciate Director Baugh, as in B-A-U-G-H, rather than Director Bob. And on line 346, so that residents and irrigators, rather than residents of irrigators.
Okay,
Thank you.
those all seem like administrative amendments that can be managed without, so unless anybody has any concerns, we'll make those corrections. Madam Clerk, you good with that?
Duly noted, Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing any other corrections, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Now we'll move on to public hearings. Item A, ordinance 311, an ordinance adopting amending 7.4.23 of the Village of Los Ranchos Code. Ms. Schultz to provide a recap of the ordinance.
Mayor Rael, trustee members, thank you. As a reminder, this is a proposed change to the village code to modify daytime hours for excessive noise as regulated by the nuisance code in the Code of Ordinances. Today, what the code says is that quiet hours are between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. in the village. The proposal in this ordinance update would shift that 6 a.m. number to 8 a.m., and it would also add 2 exemptions, one of which this board added at its last meeting. The first new exemption is for residential maintenance activities not to include construction. And then the second exemption, which was proposed with the original iteration of the bill, is for emergency utility repair performed on government-owned utilities. With that, staff has no proposed changes at this time. Happy to answer any questions.
Before we go to that, members of trustees, is there anyone signed up on this ordinance, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor, we have a couple of individuals who signed up to speak. However, Attorney Chappell will need to swear them in.
Okay.
Our first individual, or both of you that signed up, Mr. Sanchez, Ms. Rael, if you would please stand.
Yes, anyone that's going to speak on any of the issues, if you would raise your right hand, and do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Thank you, Attorney Chappell. Ms. Rael, if you would please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Teresa Rael, 1005 L. Alhambra Circle. I wasn't really prepared for this. I didn't realize it was on the agenda. But I am opposed to changing the time to 8 o'clock. For one, Albuquerque is 8 a.m., and a lot of times people don't even realize that the village is the village. And secondly, I think that construction costs are going to actually be more for the residents because it leads to extended project duration. The crews may have to work overtime to meet the deadlines. There's reduced productivity due to shorter hours, so therefore it's going to require more days. And who's going to really enforce this? Because I feel like you're now relying on the neighbors to be ratting each other out for stuff that's taking place at their property. And I don't think that really builds a very good community. And so for residential yard maintenance, that would include the village facility staff because they blow the tennis courts out at 6:30 in the morning come summertime due to the heat. And you can't blame them for that. And I'm not real sure how this even came about because I kind of wonder, is it the residents that are totally opposed to Jim Long's development or people that were opposed to Taft Junior High and moving to Taylor? Now both the schools have construction going on. So I also think that, concrete cannot be poured really in the heat of the day. It weakens the concrete, it evaporates too quickly. And so, anyway, for all those reasons, I think it should just stay where it is.
Thank you, Ms. Rayo. Our next individual is Mr. Vincent Sanchez. If you would, you have 2 minutes.
Evening. Vincent Sanchez, 6802 Rio Grande. The village proposed noise ordinance of 8 to 10, I believe, is unreasonable. The summer temperatures in central New Mexico make it difficult on people that are actually doing the work. The heat of the late morning reduces the time of many construction materials and can also lead to outcomes not desired by the end user. Who has complained about concrete cracking? And how enforceable is this new standard? As there seems to be difficulty with enforcement as is. Why add more restrictive timelines, time violations to chase? When it is likely the instant of a temporary job anyway. I also want to address the second half of this proposed amendment. 10 p.m. also seems unreasonable. If I had to do any actual work, no matter what time of the year it is, the hour from 9 to 10 would require lighting. Lights and noise seem to be far more intrusive to the neighbors at 9 to 10 than the AM hours. Farming and keeping the valley green requires an early commitment. Are we a semi-rural area or a retirement community? The noise level of a semi-rural area when compared to nearby cities should have less frequent noise, but louder sounds, just by the nature of what is required to maintain a rural character. I really do feel that 6 a.m. is not unreasonable, but 10 is, when thinking about it from a construction standpoint. But 10 p.m. from the standpoint of celebration seems appropriate. If any change was to happen, a 7 a.m. start would be, in my mind, the only thing in the realm of reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. With that, Mayor and trustees, that concludes public comment on this item of business.
All right, trustees, before we go to each of you, we just need a motion to adopt the ordinance and then have a discussion on the ordinance. So we need a motion to put it on the table. Not hearing a motion to put it on the table for discussion? Go ahead, trustee.
I'll pass.
Okay.
At this point, yeah.
Trustee Kiefer?
I'll make a motion for discussion purposes for ordinance number 311.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Yeah, let me just remind the trustees, look, putting a motion on the table for discussion is putting it on the table for discussion. If we say no, then the item just sits there as with no action. So if you don't like the item, put it on the table and then vote against it. That's fine, but you just can't just let it sit there, or else we all look at each other and say, okay, somebody's gonna make a decision. I'd love to be able to make the motions, but I can't. So anyway, that being said, the item is on the table for discussion. Trustee Ball.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to say, this is the first time I've been out in the community proactively sought out in response to an agenda item for the village, like multiple times. And the different community members that came to me and that I talked to had different pieces of this that they, were unhappy about, but I didn't have anybody who said, yes, please move forward as it's being proposed and was advertised. There were concerns, as we heard, I think legitimate concerns about how hot it is in the summer, and that everybody who needs to be getting things done before it gets too hot appreciates 6 a.m. And so, 8 is just a significant narrowing of that, much more restrictive. And at the same time, concern that, well, hey, why landscaping and not the other things that need to get done? And frankly, that's where, I heard people say that their neighbor, has a blower, or the landscaping people are coming in early, and that's a significant source of noise. And under what was advertised, we would be in a situation where if neighbors, and hopefully neighbors can agree, now neighbors can work it out amongst themselves. But if they can't, the only backstop is the village code. And under what's being proposed, there'd be no way to say you can't be as loud as you want anytime that you want if what you're doing is landscaping or, quote unquote, residential maintenance, which also seemed like maybe, sort of a bridge too far. So I guess my sense is that if there is anything that would be done to change what the code currently is, I could see 7 o'clock from 6 o'clock as just a singular change without any other exceptions other than the emergency work performed by government-owned utilities that was proposed. So that's sort of what I took from the conversations that I had in the community.
Okay, any other comments?
I can
Trustee Renat?
kind of weigh in on this. I think that that 6 o'clock may be too early, especially during summer months. You have families at home, you have children at home, and again, I've experienced this with former neighbors who are no longer in the village, who would, in fact, be up at 6 o'clock and using their, garden tools and all in order to clear away their property. I think 7 is probably a much better compromise. I'm also reminded that 7 o'clock is when we typically hear waste management coming through the village as well, and so it's sort of a benchmark, okay, and so I wouldn't have a problem if we were able then to segment out those summer months for an earlier time start, and give people an opportunity to kind of enjoy the semi-rural nature that we have in the village, and not try and press it so that people are distraught with each other over what's going on in houses and families beside them.
Okay. Any other comments? Trustee Edwards?
I think when this came around last time, I think I was somewhat in favor for a later time. But some really fine points have been made here, and I thought more about my own personal operation. I think about Jacobo coming up here, and somebody's going to tell him the perfect time to bail, hey, he can't do it. That's kind of ridiculous. I mean, we all make noise. I think what people are probably objecting to is a construction site, and a half hour before hammers start swinging, people are playing loud music. And there's going to be some beeping vehicles and stuff like that. I can see that there's some unnecessary loud sounds that need to happen. But we need to live our lives in such a way that's practical. And I would not want to vote on an ordinance that's going to cause somebody to have a heat stroke needlessly. I mean, guys start early on construction so that they can actually work and finish so they can go return to their families as opposed to going to the emergency room. I think to myself, the length of the workday on a construction site, can you imagine you might turn a one-day job into a two-day job, and that doesn't make any sense to me. I think if you know and you like your neighbors and you respect them and you communicate with them, you can avoid all this. It could be that, hey, you're going to do the work on that side of the house first, and then as you get over to me, it's going to be a half hour later. Goes a long way to helping smooth things out. I did a comparison to the city. There is nothing in the county. And when it comes to nothing in the county, then you compare to what it is in the city. And the city's at 7. I don't know why we need to make ourselves more restrictive to 8 a.m. I think that that's too long in the tooth. I mean, we start harvesting at 6 a.m. People could say that we're making too much noise with ladders. And so I'm just, I think that 8 a.m. is significantly too restrictive. I think there's too much harm that can come from it. And that's my 2 cents.
Okay, anybody else? Trustee Kiefer?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have a question first before I give my 2 cents. Shanna, what would your thoughts be on enforcement?
Mayor Rael, Trustee Kiefer, the department can figure out a way to enforce whatever. I will say a later start time would be easier for us because it would mean staff generally works 8 to 5. We will do after hours enforcement as needed, but if the start time was 8 a.m., that would better align with the traditional working hours of the department. But if it's to be 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., if there is a complaint, we will investigate it.
And just out of curiosity, do you guys have decibel readers? Is that how you would investigate?
Mayor Rael, Trustee Kiefer, yes, there are little handheld machines, and the department does own one.
Interesting. Okay. I kind of go back to the thought of, our culture. Who are we? Who do we claim to be? And, you go back to the days before technology and everything else, we used roosters, right? Roosters woke you up, and roosters stopped the work in the evening when they put themselves to bed, right? Like that was how communities ran back in the day, and they tend to wake up rather early. I see both sides. I see the inconvenience of really loud construction projects, but I also see the need for early start times, especially as our temperatures keep rising year after year after year, our average temperatures. And so I guess I'm of the mindset of earlier and of earlier start times rather than being as restrictive of a later start time, and hope that these projects that are really impacting our community are short time projects.
Well, before we go to probably what I see maybe is an amendment, which is fine with me, I will say this. You all never fail to amaze me in the community as a whole. We propose this for lots of reasons. One, there are lots of construction projects going on in the community all the time. There are 3 houses going on right now being built on Rio Grande. There is the project off of Guadalupe. There is a major repaving project in the middle of 4th Street. My point simple being is that we tend to think of this issue as what's happening today. And there's no question, but I got calls from more people about the noise with the beepers on trucks backing up in the morning on that project at Guadalupe. I got calls from folks who are concerned about even waste management coming in as early. So I do think that there is a segment of our community, older people who sleep in later, or young people who sleep in later, et cetera, that are just concerned about the noise. I actually grew up on a farm. I understand. Yeah, you try and bale hay early in the morning because the dew helps keep the hay together. But a baler does not make the same kind of noise that the truck beeping or a boombox in a construction site going on that early in the morning. I mean, they're just different. But I think that the point here was for me on this particular ordinance is that if we're a rural community, we don't want to have all the same noises that urban communities have, right? So having said that, I think there's a compromise that could happen here, but I do think I want to make sure I was going to ask Shanna. Shanna, let's just make sure right now, what are the exemptions right now in the ordinance that are exempt from the hours?
Mayor Rael, thank you for that question. That is what I was going to try and chime in with. What's written in the ordinance today, not the amended version, It says this provision shall not apply to any noise from livestock or agricultural activities, but shall apply to noise from domesticated animals or household pets. That's the only exemption in the ordinance today. The proposal is to add the public utility repair exemption and the exemption that this body adopted a month ago related to residential maintenance.
So right now, all the agricultural pieces is already taken care of. They can farm whenever they want. Just don't get up so early, Jacobo, because you can't start before 5. But all the agricultural piece is done, all of the maintenance and landscaping sort of provisions that we all want, or that people start in this. So this really is, and then the construction for emergency repairs, if you will, that are required in terms of just getting them done. So just want to make sure that for the record, those are all exempt from this time period. So with that being said,
Mayor, may I ask one question?
Trustee Kiefer.
Because I know it was in your example. If we approved this with an 8 a.m. start time, would our contract with solid waste be amended that they can't start till 8 a.m.?
Absolutely. Any contract that we have to, as they say, lead by example, and we'd have to amend or give them direction that they can't start picking up until 8 a.m.
Thank you.
Go ahead there.
Trustee Baldwin?
Listening to the conversation and our deliberation, I'm hearing sort of a number of things that sort of seem to be consistent. I think there's concern about 8 a.m. being too late. Mindful that in the summer months, earlier can be more helpful to getting things done in, this semi-rural community that we all love. And so it strikes me there may be 2 ways to approach a compromise, both of which would be less restrictive than what's currently proposed, so I don't think it would be considered a material amendment. One, instead of it being 8, we do 7. Simple, 1-hour shift. We are, literally splitting the difference, but that hour makes a big difference when you're talking about both a little extra time for quiet and a little earlier time for getting stuff done, whether it's waste management starting their rounds or somebody fixing, a leak in their roof. We could also look at time splitting it so that, in the hot summer months, it's 6, and in the, winter months, it's 7. But I guess I would be interested in hearing whether there's any appetite for that before I would make a motion to amend the motion on the floor.
Trustee Kiefer?
I guess as far as I'm concerned, I think the original proposal is where I'm leaning.
More what?
The original proposal of 8 a.m. is where I'm still leaning because of the exceptions, right? So that's going to take care of the agriculture. So that's still the semi-rural. That's going to take care of, we would have an adjustment to the solid waste. That's still going to take care of residential landscaping. So it's going to take care of a lot of those manual responsibilities that homeowners have are already included in as an exception to the 8 a.m. start time.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, well, we have a motion on the table to approve the ordinance as presented. If Trustee Baldwin, I heard you might be wanting to make an amendment. This would be the time if you are so inclined.
So I would move an amendment to the current amendment that would create a set of quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
Do we have a second?
I would second.
It's been moved and second on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Trustee Edwards.
I like that compromise. Nobody likes to get woken up at a particular time of day, and I get that. I don't think we're being dishonorable to our agriculture if that's an exemption. And I said the last time we were looking at discussing this, maybe it's a way, if somebody needs to do something earlier, they get to come in and write a check for $50 and they get to have 1 or 2 extra days to come in earlier, because that's just what's gonna have to happen. I think we should provide an avenue for people to be successful and get things accomplished and not stand in the way of progress.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I just want to be clear that the motion is to change the quiet hours from 10 to 7. It would not include the additional residential maintenance exception, but it would include the government-owned utility exemption.
Wait a minute,
So let me,
so the exemptions are already in the law, so if.
no. This would be just removing the additional one that would give a free pass entirely to landscaping, that anyone could make any noise at any time of the day or night. And I think if we have a compromise at 7 a.m. and we have the existing agricultural exemption and the utility-owned, the government-owned utilities exemption, that we're actually having a pretty simple, straightforward amendment. So I just want to be clear, because I thought I did when my comments, and I wasn't sure in the motion I actually made.
So Shanna, can you track that for us, please?
Yes, Mayor Rael. So the proposal that Trustee Baldwin has made would take out the exemption that this body added last month. It would change the time from 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. and it would keep in the exemption, the new exemption originally proposed related to public utilities.
Just for clarification, the exemption that was added at the last was for agriculture?
Mayor Rael, the exemption that was added last month says residential maintenance activities not to include construction. The agriculture exemption is already in today's code. That is not proposed to be removed, added, or changed at this time.
Correct.
So Shanna, just to make sure my head is wrapped around it, nobody could do anything from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. regarding residential maintenance.
Mayor Rael, sorry, go ahead.
With as it is with the exemption, they could do residential maintenance starting at 6 a.m. All the way to 10 p.m. Or from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. they couldn't, but at 6 a.m. you could start doing residential maintenance. So Ms. Baldwin's waiting longer for residential maintenance till 7 a.m., correct?
Mayor Rael, Trustee Kiefer, yes, the start time would be 7 a.m. with no exemption for residential maintenance. So whether it's maintenance or construction, that start time wouldn't be until 7 a.m.
But I just want to be clear, if the exemption says that there is no, that these provisions shall not apply to any noise from residential maintenance activities, then there is no time frame. They could make noise related to residential maintenance at any time.
Mayor Rael, Trustee Baldwin, yes, the exemptions are from all time periods, not just the 10 p.m. to 6, 7, or 8 a.m., whatever you decide on.
So I could go outside and blow my yard at midnight.
Mayor Rael, Trustee Kiefer, the way that this bill is currently in front of you, yes.
Okay.
The bill or the amendment?
Mayor Rael, yes.
The amendment, right. Okay. So just to be clear, so the issue then, as you described, Trustee Kiefer, is that under this provisions, then you could basically cut your grass at 2 in the morning if you can't sleep. So the question becomes is, Trustee Baldwin, your amendment makes an interesting twist here. Are you saying that, it feels like you're exempting by not including commercial landscaping from being done during those hours? Was that your intent?
No, it just makes sure that any residential maintenance has to start at 7 a.m. or later. It actually creates a time frame that under the proposed, as was in the packet, proposed amendment basically gives a free pass to residential maintenance any time of the day or night, any amount of noise. There would be no way that the village could enforce anything related to landscaping or residential maintenance activities. So all I'm doing is saying, remove that so that that universe, including construction, has to exist with the time frame start, which is 7 a.m. Currently, the code says 6 a.m.
Okay. All right. Do you all understand the amendment as it's presented?
No, 2 seconds.
Okay. I think the approach is that the 7 a.m. is obviously being changed from the bill, which was at 8, which we proposed. The compromise is to move it to 7, right? The next piece is that landscaping and or residential, if you will, landscaping is permitted to happen after 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So that you can't go out in the middle of the night and do your lawn mowing. So it's the opposite of what we were talking earlier. I think that's what confused us. All right, so just to be clear, this would restrict landscaping work between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. during the day and prohibit it from 10 p.m. to 6:59 a.m.
Noisy.
Yes, noisy type work. Right.
Exactly, you could be quiet and do
Be
that.
quiet. All right.
And that's qualified, but what is the qualified decibels then? Because in the city of Albuquerque, I think they're 50 and 55.
Mayor Rial, Trustee Edward, the City of Albuquerque code is based more on land use, and so there's different decibel measurements depending on who's making the noise and who's hearing it. In the village, it's 50 decibels during daytime hours, which are currently 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and it's 40 decibels in nighttime hours, which is 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So 50 and 40.
That's us. So what's a 40 and what's a 50?
Mayor Rial, the 50 is what we would measure during the daytime as an allowed decibel level.
I got that. Give me a couple of examples. What is a 50 and what is a 40?
Mayor Rial, Trustee Edward, the volume that I'm speaking at on this microphone right now is probably about 60 decibels.
60?
Mayor Rial, Trustee Edward, I think we touched on this a little bit at last month's hearing, that this amendment was not intended to dive into the decibel issue, which is likely an issue that the village should address in a future amendment. Noise ordinances across the country are kind of running into this issue that decibel levels set at one point in time are just no longer realistic. So I hear your question and your concern, and I think that's legitimate, but staff did not come prepared with changes to decibel levels for the amendment this evening.
40 seems a little light.
Sure. We've got an amendment on the floor. I think we now understand what it means. Is there any other comments on the amendment as proposed? Hearing, seeing none? Oh, go ahead, Trustee Kiefer.
So I appreciate this amendment, Ms. Trustee Baldwin, now that I understand it and I get it. And I think that was, thank you for pointing that out, because that was not my intent in adding it. My intent was to make sure that people were quiet from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on the residential maintenance. And so, yeah, I didn't want my neighbors, mowing their lawn at 2 a.m. either. So thank you for that. Would you be open, because we're striking that, to change it back to a 6 a.m.?
I would.
Let's just make sure. All right, so explain a little bit, Trustee Kiefer, your logic here.
So, Mayor, it's to keep it quiet for everything except for agriculture, livestock, and any noises from animals. and emergency repair work would be quiet from 10 PM to 6 AM. But by moving it back to the 6 AM that the standard language was, it allows neighbors to be able to really get out there when it is cooler, because in July or in August, 6 AM could still be 70, 75 degrees already. And with larger properties, you know, they're riding lawnmowers, and give people that opportunity rather than having to wait till 7 AM.
Wow, okay. We're going around the horn here, my friends. All right, so Shanna, it seems like we're going back to the same, what we already have in our ordinance. Is that fair?
The proposal trustee Kiefer just made is status quo with the new utility exemption.
Right. Okay. I would,
In which case, I would accept a friendly amendment to my amendment to make it a 6 AM, striking the residential maintenance full-on exemption and retaining the government-owned utilities exemption being added in, and all the rest of the section 3, sub 3 remains as is.
okay. Any other comments? All right, we have a motion and a friendly amendment to the motion to change from 7 to 6 AM. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying, or do we have to do it as a roll call, Madam Clerk?
Do you want to should we conduct a roll call on this amendment? Thank you, Attorney Chappell. Yes, let's go ahead with
All right.
Trustee Baldwin.
Aye.
And Trustee Edward.
Aye.
Trustee Kiefer.
Yes.
Trustee Raynow. Motion passes 4-0 on that amendment.
So we have an amendment now. So Mrs. Schultz, please describe what's on the table for final passage here.
Mayor Rael, trustee members, what's on the table are quiet hours between 6 AM and 10 PM, just as it exists today.
10 PM and 6 AM.
Yes, sorry, between 10 PM and 6 AM, which is what the code says today, with a new exemption that would read, these provisions shall further not apply to emergency repair work performed on government-owned utilities when such work is necessary to restore or protect essential public services. So essentially, the only new change to the code would be the addition of the exemption.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've come full circle as it relates to this ordinance. So any other discussion on this issue? Seeing none, all those in favor, go to the clerk for a roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go with Trustee Baldwin.
Aye.
Trustee Edward.
Aye.
Trustee Kiefer.
Yes.
Trustee Raynow.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to item 8. Yes, it is. It's now that time of the night where we can take a 5-minute break.
Is that going to be on YouTube? Because that could get a few laughs.
I'm pretty sure it will. Pretty sure it will.
We're going to be on Saturday Night Live, baby.
Yeah. We're about ready to get going, folks. Trustee Edwards, we got 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, I was like, I told Neil, my dinner's gonna be chocolate tonight. Thank you.
John, can you get Trustee Edwards so we can get going?
We're still missing trustee right now.
Well, we'll just have to catch up. It's just the audit report. All right, let's get back to our meeting so that we can stop making noise if we get past 10 o'clock. All right, we're back in business. We are on item 8, resolution number 2026-04-01, a resolution authorizing the acceptance of the FY 2025 audit. Ms. Rodriguez, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Trustees. Before you stands resolution number 2026-0401, accepting the fiscal year 2025 audit.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Motion to, oh, go ahead. Motion to approve resolution 2026-0401.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. You had a good presentation. Let's give, do we have a roll call on this, Madam Clerk? Madam Clerk, let's start with the roll call, and we'll see if Trustee Renan gets here.
Thank you, Mayor. Trustee Baldwin.
Yes.
Trustee Edward.
Yes.
Trustee Kiefer.
Yes.
And we'll hold on tight.
And Trustee Renan, how do you vote on accepting the resolution on the audit?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That
Thank
motion
you.
passes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item B. This is approval of the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority intergovernmental agreement. Ms. Rinaldi.
Mayor, trustees, in the utility. Mayor, trustees, in the utility phase of the project, all utility providers within the project area are required to review, comment, and identify any conflicts in a project area at 30% design, 60% design, and by 90% design, they're supposed to have a letter of commitment for relocation or remediation of any conflicts within a construction zone. In the case of the utility authority, their upgrades and relocations were significant enough to hamper the time to bid on the overall construction project, delaying the schedule significantly and basically resulting in a utility phase that was a construction phase. So to save time, to save money, it was agreed between the two entities that their improvements would be co-constructed at the same time as ours. Under the purview of the project being completely managed by the Village of Los Ranchos, but designed, engineered, estimated, and paid for by the Albuquerque Utility Authority. So they have presented construction drawings and they have presented an engineer's estimate, and their design has been accepted by our engineering firm and has been incorporated into our construction plans. What that requires is an agreement between the village and Los Ranchos for that purpose. For bidding this project with both projects combined, we will be constructing their improvements as part of the roadway. And in this case, it's works out great because their construction, their infrastructure improvements will be made at the same time as storm drain improvements. So it doesn't delay our project by any means. They are still responsible to inspect the work. They will have inspectors on site to make sure that our contractor is building to their required specifications. And at the point of award of the construction contract, when we bid it, at whatever cost that comes in at for their bid items, that is what they're responsible for, regardless of their engineer's estimate. So it could be lower, it could be higher. Within 30 days of receiving an invoice from us after the award of the project, they will pay us the amount that has been awarded. So we will have that money in hand before construction starts. They are responsible to review any potential change orders of the contractor, something underground, something that causes a delay in materials, anything that could impact the project schedule or the cost of the project would require a change order. It would have to be approved by them. They don't approve it in a timely manner. It's considered approved, and they're responsible for any cost increase. There could be construction deducts. We would be responsible for paying back any money that was not expended of the portion that they paid to us by invoice. This is the most efficient way to do it. The agreement has been, we spent many months on this agreement. It was developed by both entities, by myself and by Jane Rael at the Utility Authority, reviewed by Attorney Chappell, and his changes were incorporated, and it was very close to the deadline for Danielle. It was reviewed and approved for presentation to the Board of Trustees by the Utility Authority. If you adopt it, and the mayor signs it, it will go back to them simply for signature. It has been reviewed and approved by them.
Is there anyone signed up on this item, Madam Clerk?
Mayor and trustees, there is not.
Okay, we need a motion to put the IJA on the table for consideration. Do we have a motion?
I move approval of the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority intergovernmental agreement.
Do we have a second? Second. All right, are there any questions on this item?
I have one question.
Trustee Edward.
Based upon the way the first section of 4th Street was redone and some of the delays that happened there, are we better protected, and would those delays that occurred there, how would those play out in this circumstance?
Mayor, Trustee Baldwin, Trustee Edward, there was an entire utility phase prior to construction on phase 1.
Okay.
There was literally a construction phase that did nothing but deal with the utility authorities. Keene's gone, it was very painful. With the utility authorities' improvements and relocations. We're completely avoiding that by doing it this way. We also don't have to do an interim paving that we would be tearing up to put in a storm drain. So there's material costs and savings to taxpayers on, no need to expend those funds on the utility authority's part. The delays in phase 1 were relative to a level of investigation underground that did not occur. The investigation, the potholing, the topo, the geotech, and this phase, we should not face those issues.
And so this is a plan to simultaneously and/or just in front of road construction, the utilities go in?
Mayor, trustee, that is correct. Concurrent with our first phase, which is the storm drain.
And this is a policy of theirs or of ours, or a shared policy, or?
Frankly, Mayor, Trustee Edwards, when it came down to the utility authority not meeting the deadlines of 30, 60, 90, we need your plans, it was going to create a significant delay in the project. And this was a way to mitigate that potential delay, as well as to avoid an entire utility phase of construction.
Thank you.
Any questions? Other questions? Trustee,
Yeah,
right
the major question I have is, what are we doing in terms of informing the community about what's going on with the project? I mean, 4th Street is barricaded and everything else these days. So, yeah, I know, and that's just part of what happens during construction. But I think we need to be able to be very proactive in getting the word out to the community so that they understand what's going to be done, when it's going to be done, so that they be able to orchestrate their lives around it.
Mayor, Trustee Renwell, we have an entire construction mitigation plan put into place whereby the Los Ranchos Main Street Association will be the direct business contact, the liaison between the construction project manager and the businesses, residents, and larger community to handle social media, to handle events, to mitigate construction activities, to ensure that we don't leave this to the contractors because they're terrible at that. But Magda and I and the State Main Street Program have put together a mitigation plan, and there will be significant advance notice of the project when it is beginning, interimly, and particularly direct impacts on businesses and residents' access as the project is constructed. What you're seeing out there now, if I may, is an interim paving project that is repair of existing asphalt to mitigate the failing asphalt out there now up until such time as the roadway is constructed. It could be several years before we continue north because of funding, and the asphalt was not going to handle that for 2 to 3, 4, 5 years. And we had an expiring legislative appropriation, and the decision was made to get this project done, and we managed to pull it together quite quickly. That information went out on the website and on TextMyGov. I never get that right, but whatever that is called. And we are, Albuquerque Asphalt is an exceptional contractor, and we've had very few calls, and the issues that we've had, they corrected immediately today and yesterday.
I have one last question.
Go ahead,
There's
Trustee
some
Edwards.
sizable properties in that section that are vacant land. Is the utilities being put in, is it being put in with a stub out to that such that the infrastructure doesn't have to be torn up at a later date if that area gets developed?
So Mayor, Trustee Edward, we have informed every single property owner along that corridor of the project. We've shown them their access, their drive pads, and we have done everything we possibly can to determine whether there are, especially on potentially developable properties, like the ones you're talking about. We've made contact with every single property owner so that they know what is coming. We've provided exhibits and had them sign off on every exhibit that shows what their access will look like, and we've negotiated that with them. Where the code allows, where there are not development plans, we have provided their access where it was informal along the entire stretch of their frontage, those types of things. So every single property owner has been consulted with.
But as far as the water line itself, will there be stub outs into those larger properties so we don't have to tear up the road?
So utilities, in the utility phase, the utilities must identify what their potential upgrades are, what their, and any development plans they have. It's basically on the property owners to make sure that all the utility providers, public utilities like the utility authority, fire suppression, water and sewer, those are always available for development. But as far as the other things like fiber and things that we have franchise agreements with but are not public, the onus is on them to make sure that they're providing whatever needs to be provided for future development.
Okay, any other questions on this agreement? Seeing none, we have a motion on the table to approve the IGA. Do we need a roll call on this, Madam Clerk? No? All those in favor of the IGA as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll now move to item C, approval of Mayor Rael negotiating to purchase agreement for water rights to be used at the Del Norte open space. Mr. Chappell.
Mayor and trustees, this is a matter that was discussed in the closed session. The only thing that will be necessary or permitted is a motion to approve or disapprove this items based upon the discussion in the closed session.
Very good. We need a motion to approve this, approve, I guess, to give me authority to move forward with these water rights discussions. Do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. Move on to item D, approval/disapproval authorizing the mayor to settle the village claims for recovery of remediation costs and the release of a lien on the property located at 605 Tascosa Northwest as discussed in the closed session. Mr. Chappell to explain.
Mayor and members of the trustees, again, this was discussed in the closed session. It is confidential, so the motion should be to approve the settlement in accordance with the discussion in the closed session.
Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move approval to authorize you to settle the village claims for recovery of remediation costs and the release of a lien on the property located at 605 Tascosa Northwest as discussed in closed session.
Do we have a second?
I do.
We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll move on to item number 9, Chief Financial Officer and Administrator's Reports. So we'll go to Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. Before you is the March 2026 cash report. The ending cash balance at March 31st is $15,093,770.59, which is a decrease of over $265,000 for the month. However, we are still at a year-to-date excess of revenue over expenditures of $786,000, $320.76. Before you are 4 items that are large expenses. The most significant one is the payment for the water purchase at over $400,000. And I stand for any questions.
Any questions on the financial report? All right, we'll move on to Mr. Avila for your administrator's report.
Mayor and trustees, I have the report before you, and if there are any questions, please bring them up. Just point out that there are a couple of timelines coming to us. One is the ICIP that needs by resolution, and then also the budget in May, so that those 2 items are going to be on our calendar. And then just kudos to our departments. There were many events that were conducted. Approximately 500 people in attendance at the Easter egg hunt. And we also have a yard sale that will definitely have a large turnout. And then, of course, at the Ag Center, there was a spring event for seed exchange, bringing people again to the village and sharing what we have to offer here. Stand for any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Avila? No questions? All right, we'll then move on. Oh, I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting you, Trustee Reyna. My apologies.
I did note that, yeah, here we go. I did note that there was additional construction going on in the second building. That's the furthest building north at the Millers, site. Are you folks restucturing that building so that it's going to be occupied?
Excuse me, Trustee Rhino, trustees, Mayor. The building had the front room taken down, and so we are stuccoing that. There's nothing going on right now to do any construction inside. We still have to complete the roadway and get our access for that site. And then these projects are lined up again for future funding.
Thanks.
Yeah, Trustee Reyna, I think that the issue really with that outbuilding on that particular, if you will, site is that the corner of that building was well within the safety range, if you will, of 4th Street. And it made sense to take that one piece of it. I know that we don't want to take down those types of buildings anytime. And so they took that piece out so that we would be without, outside, if you will, as they call it, the safety zone of the road. And I just asked them to just restucco that wall so that it blends back into the original building. But there is, as Mr. Avila described, there is some extensive work that needs to be done inside those 2 buildings as we move forward with maybe using them in the future for other events. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Trustee Edward.
For all the different construction projects that we're doing on the older buildings, are our expectations of what it's going to take to get things done in line, or are we getting some ugly surprises that are going to cause delays or cost overruns?
Trustee Edwards, Board of Trustees. I don't think that there's surprises in that we know that these are old buildings and there's going to be issues. We've investigated and mitigated some of these buildings already to get the information that we need to say, okay, what would this project take, and to pursue funding to get those buildings up to date. So in that regard, it's not a surprise, but it's unfortunate that we're having to do that. However, the cost to repair those is far less than you would to rebuild them, now in today's dollars.
Okay.
Okay, one last piece, I think, as relates to that area that we were talking about earlier. We are very close to finding a more safe entrance into the Del Norte open space with the acquisition of property. And so we will be coming back to you all with some information as it relates to a new access into the North open space that's much safer and much better for the community as a whole. With that being said, we'll now go to trustee reports. So we'll start with Trustee Reyna. We'll go from the R's to the B's.
Okay, so you get my notes. So I'll try and keep it short here. The couple of things of interest. One is with APS, Taylor Middle School, the traffic seems to be working a whole lot better in the afternoon. I had talked with BCSO, and their school liaison officer who's in the school full-time, the deputy is at the entrance to the school on Guadalupe Trail, monitoring traffic and helping students cross Guadalupe. Unfortunately, there are parents that are still parking on Guadalupe and asking their students to come meet them outside of the campus. And with the traffic that's flowing back and forth, that can be somewhat unsafe. And so he's out there, and I think that that's certainly helped. And the students now realize that there's someone going to be there in order for them to make sure that they cross safely. The AM traffic into and outside of the campus seems to be working pretty well. I'm not getting any reports from residents about the problem. The problem occurs in the afternoon with the backup. Okay. And I'm still trying to figure out with the principal to see whether there's an opportunity for us to extend the roadway in and around the school to use some of the excess land that is east of the main building in order to get more cars onto the campus. But that's still in discussion stage. I've also been asked to represent the village on the Metropolitan Transportation Board. So I've been attending, I attended the last meeting. And what's interesting at this point is that they're in the process of updating the area-wide maps to include roadway, bikeway, pedestrian, and transit networks. And looking at those maps, there's not very much activity that's been identified in the North Valley. And so I think that we need to get it updated so that we are, again, part of the network. Reason for that is that obviously transportation and roadway development is a precursor to economic development. And so if we want to take advantage of the planning that's going on through the MTB, I think that we need to be on the page with them. The maps are only draft right now. And kind of my next step is to sit down with with staff at the COG and be able to kind of identify, what kinds of opportunities do we have in order to be part of the network. And as an example, Rio Grande Boulevard is identified as a minor arterial. along with 4th Street. The major regional arterial is 2nd Street, okay? And that's a question that I'm gonna be asking about what we can do about 2nd, because that's causing a lot of traffic that actually comes through the village. So that's an issue that we still need to work on. The evaluation process for how they identify the various maps, and whether it be bikeway, pedestrian, whatever, the evaluation process is now being changed. It had been based on traffic flows, on traffic data, but again, I think that the transportation issues far outweigh the what's happening right now. I mean, I've been talking with a couple of individuals who are colleagues again on the board, and they believe that that something needs to be done, obviously, with the river crossings, and we're certainly going to be a part of that discussion. And finally, the Metropolitan Transportation Board also works with the Water Board, and that's something that I know that Trustee Baldwin's going to be talking about. But it's also indicative of the kinds of complexity that we get into when we start looking at transportation in and around this metropolitan area. So I'll keep us all informed, and hopefully next month have some additional information for us. I'll be more than happy, by the way, if we need to, I'll be more than happy to post the links to the various maps so we can all take a look at them.
Yeah, those maps are actually pretty informative. It might be worthwhile sending them around so folks can look at them. All right, thank you, Trustee Renau. Trustee Kiefer.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be pretty short. The only things that I have is my monthly talk tea, which is usually on the first Tuesday of the month, is moved in May. So you'll see an email. It'll be on May 13th, I believe, because I had to make some adjustments on calendar and location TBD. The other thing is, and I don't know how much authority we have or don't have, so Shanna, this is gonna be one for you. In the site development plan for the Chavez Guadalupe project, it was listed that that huge 100-foot cottonwood tree would remain intact, that kind of butts against Guadalupe, that has been there forever. The problem is now with no irrigation going to that property, and a bunch of heavy vehicles going onto that property, that soil is getting really compressed and that tree is really struggling. And I don't know if that's I don't want it to become an excuse of, oh, well, the tree died, so now we get to take it down. And so I don't know if there's anything, because it was in the site plan, that we can do from a code enforcement standpoint, or if we can just slight encouragement of, hey, can we water the tree and make sure it stays alive?
Mayor Ryal, Trustee Kiefer, I have a really good relationship with the project manager at that site. I talk to him weekly at least. And so this is an issue that I will raise with him tomorrow and get some feedback and see if I'd like to start with some maybe voluntary action by them to water the tree a little more frequently. I know that they have had water trucks out on the site to manage the dirt and dust, and so perhaps there's an opportunity there to also water the tree while they're out there. But I will reach out to him tomorrow, and then I will follow up with you.
I appreciate that. And I think at this point, that's all I've got. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll now move to Trustee Edward.
To me or to?
To you, senor.
Oh, you don't have any?
No, I'm last. this
We're
time.
going from
Oh,
our,
we're taking turns?
yeah.
Oh, boy. All
He
right.
gets the gavel. He gets to-
So a little bit of my commentary tonight has to deal with youth. I used to come to these meetings and they would have the Boy Scouts present the flag for the, I'd love to see that again. Or the Girl Scouts, or the ROTC from Taylor or Cibola or Valley. I think that that creates a greater sense of community, make more people maybe interested in watching our meetings and being informed. And as it relates to that, and you're sitting around, you're thinking, what are my kids gonna do this summer? There really isn't anything in the village of Los Ranchos. There's not a Little League. The Little Leagues that we have, we don't support. We don't have a bunch of basketball courts where they can go and play. There is not a community center. There's not a pool. I think we sell ourselves short, and I think we need to be diligent on this. We have a declining birth rate in this country, and families are kind of taking a back seat to a lot of people, but they're our future, and if we don't have well-adjusted kids, you're gonna have broken families, you're gonna have increased crime, and we need to give these kids something to do. And to that end, they need to know each other. And the last time I was here, when they did have the color guard, 5 boys in the local Boy Scouts, and none of them went to the same school. And my kids go to different schools, and there's kids that live nearby and nobody knows each other. And I would like to sponsor a dance. I'd like to have a couple of dances at the barn over here, primarily targeted to the teenagers, and do something where these kids can get to know each other before summer, and that they can then have another dance before the school year starts to bring people together. We shouldn't be strangers. And I will say this, and it might offend a lot of people, but it's the God's honest truth. Your kids go to those schools, my kids don't play with kids who go to those schools. You know, we live in an element of fear that if you don't go to the right school, then you don't play with those kids. And that's wrong. And I don't like that. I think we need to foster a spirit of collected goodness. And there is a lot of goodness. So I don't know if the village would like to help in the endeavors of having dances and getting sponsors and giving reasons for kids to show up. But they need to know each other, and we need to create places and placemaking and places for people to go. My kids say, hey, Dad, we'd like to go to the community center where Raymond G. Sanchez is, but the basketball courts are delegated for men that are old like you, and we don't get any court time. And the APS doesn't let anybody on their campuses. In fact, they've taken on greater lengths and extent to put up more chain link and locked gates to keep people out. When I was a kid growing up here, if you wanted to go play basketball, you'd go over to Taft, and they had at least, I don't know, 5 or 6 outdoor courts. You can't even do that anymore. I think that we could actually use the youth as an economic development tool. I think that we have enough soccer fields and fields in this community, we could have our own soccer tournament. You've got fields at Taylor, you've got them at Taft, you've got them at the park right here, you have them at the Alameda Soccer Complex. We could do something really unique, fun, and inventive. And I know that for older people, that kids are a nuisance, they don't want to fund schools, but these are people who also want to have knowledgeable, educated people take care of them when they're older and they need health care. Well, we're just, we need to fix this. And I love that Frank down there, Trustee Reinow, is passionate about the schools and is getting involved. And I think it's not just the schools. I mean, it's getting kids to be socially well adjusted, because this right here is making them socially retarded. They can't look you in the eye when they have a conversation. and they can't look at each other when they have a conversation. They text each other from across the table. And so I'd like to see how we can make this a really cool community that families seek us out because we believe in what a family represents. And for me, a family is a collection of adults who are taking care of kids and raising them to be great individuals and leaders within our community. And I think that we're falling short on that. So that's my 2 cents for the night. The last 2 cents that I would make is a request, and I've asked this for 10 years since I moved back down here about Guadalupe Trail, if we can have somebody sweep that thing at least once or twice a year. It's the main thoroughfare to get to most of the schools, and we worry about the safety of the kids and the width of the road and everything else, but yet we don't ever take care of that road. And I've asked numerous times prior trustees, and I've asked the department here, and they just say, oh, no, we just can't do that. Well, if we can sweep Rio Grande Boulevard every weekend for bicyclists that don't even live here, it creates a classism society. We have other roads in the village, and we need to take care of those roads that are the heart and the backbone of our community. I think that Guadalupe Trail might be more of a backbone than 4th Street or Rio Grande Boulevard. My daughter walked home from school today. You know, it's like, I'd like to think that she has a safe place to walk down, but all the dirt's encroaching in, people don't know where the edge of the road is, and I'd like to have that done. And I don't want to hear excuses, because I know we have the equipment to do it, and it sits in a parking lot back here 90% of the time. It doesn't do anything except for sweep Rio Grande Boulevard.
All right, thank you, Trustee Edward. Trustee Baldwin.
Thank you. Tomorrow evening at the Water Authority Board meeting, we will be taking up a resolution for a water lease from the Water Authority to the village for up to 30 acre-feet of water per year for the Agri-Nature Center for up to 2 years at a cost of $100 an acre-foot for actual use. So what this really is providing is that buffer, that sort of flex to give us the additional time to secure recognized water rights. And yet we're not leasing more than we need. We will only pay for what we use. And I just have to say how much I appreciate the collaborative partnership. This is the kind of thing that we hope to see between entities that are trying to figure out how to make things work in these challenging times for water. I also, there are these flyers up at the front table that some folks maybe saw when they came in. The MRGCD has renewed its irrigation demand management environmental water leasing program to help reduce overall surface water demand. So under this program, an MRGCD water user can temporarily lease back full or partial irrigation seasons and then immediately return to normal irrigation after that lease is over. So you can either do this year, even if you've received 1 or 2 rounds of water, you can put it into suspension, or you can do it the rest of this year and next year. Those who are interested in enrolling in this program have until May 15th, and you can find additional information on the MRGCD website. And then last, MRGCD will hold its Bernalillo County Users Meeting here at Village Hall on Thursday, June 4th, between 9 and 10:30 in the morning. And again, really great to have this kind of outreach at a critical time for water and water use in the village.
Okay, very good. That wraps up our trustees' reports. I would just say, Trustee Edwards, I do appreciate your comment about the youth and youth programs. I do think that there's an opportunity to use some of our facilities and to encourage more youth activity in the community. Here's an interesting thought, and as we look at the facilities that we do have, on many occasions when we have public meetings, it's usually the older folks that show up to these meetings. And so I might visit with John a bit and see if we can't maybe have a youth meeting to see exactly how do we encourage our youth to show up to a meeting. Because look, we're about ready to start our RCIP, right? It means an opportunity that if we want to create other places like you, I would prefer to add more basketball courts. I'd like to have more outdoor activities for young people to be able to come to the village and enjoy the village. You go to the pickleball court there at the old village hall, and inevitably it's older people from outside the village playing there, you know, and there's a basketball court there. We've put in a play structure for kids under 5 years of age to play in the back, so that way parents can shoot hoops or play pickleball where the kids play there. I want to make sure we get more of those kinds of activities in the village in different centers, right? Right now, Harnett Park is our community area. I think we have a great opportunity to do something with the Norte open space. It is away from it's buffered by Paseo, so it's not as intrusive into the community, if you will. And I think there's an opportunity there to do some community space. We've been looking at some plans, and we'll share them with you all here in the next month or so about how do we expand some of that area. You know, look, I'm with you. I think that we've got to create more of those activities. And look, basketball courts aren't just for kids. You know, maybe some of us can go in and try and shoot hoops and figure out if we can reach the basket. But long and the short, look, I really appreciate all of you, you know, bringing your perspectives to this conversation and giving us some ideas of what you think needs to happen in the village. So I will say to all of you trustees, you know, I appreciate the feedback and appreciate the fact that it gives us some direction in terms of what you all would like to see. Last but not least, I do want to say that to thank Maria and Keene and for their work on this repaving of 4th Street. It really was pulling a rabbit out of a hat to try and figure out how to spend some state monies that we had. And Maria did an amazing job along with Keene to not only get the project approved by the proper authorities, if you will, at the state, but also getting the contractor in line. And look, yeah, it's a week of discomfort for the community, but it'll be years and years of use of a pavement and a facility that is our main artery into the village. And, you know, if Phase 3 still is, you know, we haven't funded Phase 3, and it'll take some time to get that. So it was needed, and I think it shows the community that we're paying attention to our infrastructure and we're paying attention to what's going on. Yeah, we miss some things. We miss watering trees that we should probably water. We miss other things along the corridor or along our community, but I think we're doing everything we possibly can. And so on that note, I would just say, for those of you who have not gotten an opportunity to walk with the consultant on Chavis Road, please do so you get a flavor for what the infrastructure might look like and what it might not look like, so that we can make a good decision here in the next month on that project. Number one. Number two, we're obviously, some of you have already talked to our consultants on the work that we're doing on Rio Grande Boulevard as it relates to safety and the use of that facility and what we can do to make it better. So if you get a chance, please get in touch with us, and so that we can make sure you can visit with the consultants on that. They had a survey out, over 100 and some respondents to that survey with all kinds of ideas about what to do on Rio Grande Boulevard. So that's another one that's really working through. We've got the RFP will be awarded here very soon on the Agri-Nature Center, if you will, comprehensive plan that will get kicked off. Now, we thought that we have money from the state to actually do something. You know, I think we can do some really cool things at the Agri-Nature Center. And you know, and I would go back, I think with an eye to figuring out how do we get more young kids involved with agriculture and using that as an opportunity as well. And then we have another RFP that we're working on with Shanna to do some really important stuff with our planning and zoning in terms of, Shanna, describe it really quick so I always overstate it.
Mayor Real, Board of Trustees, we're looking at permitting software so that the village can move away from paper applications and paper records and do things digitally, which will be better for us and the customers.
Right. So there's some really positive things that we're doing, not only internally, but as we're doing outside in the community, and so, and it helps to get you all's feedback. So with that being said, there is no other items on our agenda. Is that right, Madam Clerk? All right, so all those in favor of, or we need a motion to adjourn, I guess, right, Ms. Clerk? Madam Clerk?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a motion? We have that motion. We have a second?
Yes.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned, and the time is approximately 9 o'clock. Right on the button, man.
Did you see what I put for you, Trustee Keeper? What, in my mailbox that I'll check? Oh, a nice
All right,
plaque.
I've got like
Oh,
15
yes, I
rooms.
did. I got so excited.
Yeah, how you doing?
Crawling on your hands.
We'll get it set.